Coming to you from Austin, Texas on this sunny day, it's Color Commentary, and we are Adrian Gonzalez.
And Michael Petchik. And neither of us got to play F&M.
Yeah, stupid pre-release, man. Everyone's excited for the new cards, and I'm just over here like, when we get to play Pauper again. We did do that Rebrew series, though, where we played Pig Trinket. That was fun. That was 5 rounds of Pig Trinket.
Yeah, no. That was enjoyable. Not 100% a replacement for F&M by any means, but, it's good to get some magic in the middle of the week.
Yeah, and we're going to try and do those more often. So
Yeah, definitely. And you've been playing a bunch of Hearthstone, so...
I've gone over to the dark side, so to speak. I actually played in what equates to a PPTQ for Hearthstone today, and Trump was there. Not Donald Trump, the famous Hearthstone streamer Trump. And my friend beat him in the semis, so I was very, very proud of him.
And you got to experience Hearthstone Salt in real life.
Dude.
You got to watch Salt from another world.
This guy, after I beat him, I overheard him talking to his friends, and he was like, "Oh, he just top decked exactly what we needed, and the RNG on this game is so dumb." And I'm like, I don't know how to feel about this, but it sounds like a Magic complaint.
Yeah, no. It turns out that when people get salty, it's pretty much unilateral. Yeah.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun, though. I had a great time playing, so...
Yeah, no. And today we're starting stuff off with a deck tech for Black-Green Aristocrats, which we realized we've mentioned a lot on the show, and we haven't actually done a deck tech for.
And just to reiterate, it's interesting that this is not necessarily a tier deck, as in it doesn't put up a lot of results on Moto, but this did take down a big tournament, and I want to say Argentina earlier this year.
Argentina Pauper Open. It also won the most recent season of the Pauper Gauntlet.
Interesting. So it is a real deck. I guess we'll get into a little bit why we don't think it's necessarily a deck that puts a lot of results on Moto, though.
Yeah. So okay. So first off, let's do a little bit of a history lesson here for people who might not have been playing as long as us. Mm-hmm. Aristocrats is named after a deck that cropped up in the Innistrad Return to Ravnica standard because it ran Cartel Aristocrat and Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Right. And
which are both creatures that sack stuff for value. So
and that mechanic is older, but the term became popularized during that era because of the aristocrat named cards that had that sacrifice effect.
Yeah. So this is going to be, a value sacrifice black-green deck, which I have actually never run, despite that being kind of up my alley. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit more of an aggro deck. It's definitely trying to keep its curve low and, go to the dome. So let's go into the creatures. So in terms of actual sack outlets, we've got Carrion Feeder, 1 black, 1/1, can't block, sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Very strong.
And then we've got Bloodthrown Vampire, which is a 1/1 for 1 and a black, and you sack a creature to give it +2/+2 until end of turn.
So it's essentially ATOG for creatures.
Yeah, that's actually a great comparison.
But it's actually a little bigger. I want to say Bloodthorn Vampire is a 2/2.
No. You're thinking of Nantuko Husk.
Oh, what's Bloodthorn?
Bloodthorn is it's a 1/1 for 2 mana. Okay,
Nantuko is a 3-drop. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. That seems to be the going rate. It seems to be 1 mana to tack on that ability. Mm-hmm. So those are your sack outlets. So very sort of aggressive oriented sack outlets. These are winning you games as a side effect. It's not just sacrifice dirtle stuff.
So that would make, and before we go on, that would make the highest converted mana cost in this deck than 2 mana. If Bloodthorn Vampire is 2 mana, right? Because the rest of these are 1 or 2. Right, a consumption.
I think there's 1 or 2 3s in here, but it is intensely low to the ground.
Very low to the ground. Sorry.
But then we've got our sacking fodder. So
Mm-hmm.
What you're actually going to be sacking, and every one of them is kind of a 2-for-1. You're going to get 2 bodies out of it. So the first is Blister Pod. 1 green for a 1/1. You get an Eldrazi. Now I'm going to mess this up. It's the Scion?
Yes.
Okay.
Like the car.
Okay. So the Scions are the 1/1s because this deck also produces Eldrazi Spawn.
Which are the O1s, yes. And I love that Blister Pod is in this deck. Blister Pod was, I want to say, not even a draft common sometimes. Maybe it was, but it was not a very good card.
But in this deck, 2 bodies for 1 green mana, and it can, in a pinch, serve as a bit of ramp. Yeah. If you need that 1 extra colorless, you can always pop the Scion for it. Then we've got Young Wolf, 1 green for a 1/1 with Undying. So That's kind of 2 sacrifices.
Yeah, it's a staple of the Stompy decks as well.
Yeah.
As it's a very good Edict Eater.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. It eats edicts all day long. So this is one where, if you need it, you can pop it twice into like a Bloodthrone Vampire to finish them off. Or, just at some point you can pop it, get another +1/+1 counter on it, and just have a 2/2.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great card.
Then we've got Brindleshote, which is a 1/1. It's a 1/1 for
2.
For 2, green and 1. And when it dies, you get a 3/3 beast.
Yes.
Which is sizably bigger. So this one, again, is kind of more one of those ones where you sacrifice it, you get an upside, and you probably don't sacrifice the second thing, but it is there if you need it.
Right. And interesting tangent while we're on the card. This card is worth a lot more in paper than it is on Moto because it was only printed in Plain Chase in paper.
Yeah.
So people want this card to be reprinted, and it's interesting that this deck is running 4 because in most decks, I think it's only like a 1 of in the sideboard, maybe.
Yeah, I believe I've seen this as like a stompy sideboard card as an alternative to Young Wolf.
Mm-hmm.
And in this deck, it's just great. It basically,
it's just pure value.
Yeah. If you've got the Carrion Feeder, it just kind of gets absorbed into the Carrion Feeder, and you get a coincidental 3/3. Then we've got Nest Invader, which is... Now, I forget this one as well. Is it 1 in a green or is it 2 in a green?
It's 1 in a green. It's a bear that brings a buddy.
Yeah, and its buddy in this case is an Eldrazi Spawn, which is the 0/1 that you can pop for a colorless.
Right.
So all of these... So you've got like 7 creatures here that are your sack outlets, and then the rest of the creatures, 16 in total, are just great to get eaten. So, kind of as an incidental side effect, this does make it, like, not the worst to go up against mono black with this, just because sometimes their edicts are just going to eat things that are going to get bigger or leave a new body behind.
Right. Edicts and Bolt are the 2 most popular removal spells in the format.
Yep.
And this deck doesn't care about either of those.
Yeah. As soon as you get, like, a Carrion Feeder with 3 tokens on it, 3 +1/+1 counters, you're gonna basically have to get 2 for 1. It's a zombie, so it can't get hit by Victim of Night. It's black, so it can't get hit by Doomblade. It could get Grasp of Darkness, but like,
who plays that card really? Like realistically, who's playing that card?
I've seen it run in mono black, but
okay.
like
very rare.
Like once you get past a certain point, you're just gonna start bashing in.
Right.
Now, I do want to note this is a slightly older list, and this list could very, very easily slot Bloodbriar into it. That 2/3 for 2 in a green.
Now, let's be fair though. That pre-release was this weekend, and that pre-release won't be on Moto until for another like 2 weeks at least. So
I think it comes out this weekend, actually, or this upcoming weekend.
Gotcha. So there's been no testing with Bloodbriar yet in this deck in official tournaments.
No, but Bloodbriar seems maybe a little win more. It does bring the curve up.
It's not good to sack the Bloodbriar is the problem, right?
Yeah. Well, and it also kind of needs a buddy to actually get any use out of it.
Yeah.
Except with the spawns and the scions, of course, because they can just sacrifice themselves at instant speed.
Right.
So we move into our spells. We got 2 Bone Splitters. Probably the best piece of equipment in the format.
Yeah, easily.
Like in terms of aggression, at least, it is hands down the most efficient.
The only other deck that plays equipment that I know of is Affinity, that plays Flare Husk just to get another body on the field.
We spent like 3 hours playing a deck with equipment in it.
Oh, Silvok Lifestaff, but that's a fringe deck. I mean, I guess this kind of is too. I'm just saying, like, there's 3 pieces of relevant equipment in the format that we can think of off the top of our heads. Bone Splitter definitely being chief among them. Yeah,
Bone Splitter is definitely the one you see the most, just because this is a pretty quick format and it is just hyper aggressive.
Right.
Then we've got 3 Hunger the Howlpacks, which is basically kind of a permanent giant growth in this deck because it's so easy to get the Morbid on it. Hunger the Howlpack is 1 green, put a +1/+1 counter on something. If a creature died this turn, put 3 +1/+1 counters instead.
Right. It's just an excellent finisher. It's a huge pump. You can blow people out mid-combat with this by like sacking in this deck you can sack anything, but like in Stompy they sack the token, they get the mana, and then they dump all the stuff on their dudes.
Well, come on this magical journey with me. Like, obviously, this would... I think by turn 3, what you go... dual land, Jungle Hollow first turn, second turn Blister Pod, or second turn Carrion Feeder, third turn Blister Pod, and then pop one of the tokens into the carrion feeder and then Hunger the Howl Pack, and you've got a 5/5 on turn 3.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Like, that's aggressive. Then we got 4 Rancor because it's a deck with green in it, and it's aggressive. Like,
Rancor is easily one of the best enchantments of the format. It's so good.
Do you know that that's part of a cycle? There are 4 other cards in that cycle
that cost 1 mana and do something like that.
I don't believe they all cost 1, but they all have the when it enters the graveyard from the battlefield text.
I think we touched on this very briefly on our EMA spoilers, just because Undying Rage, is that part of that cycle?
It is not, I believe.
Oh.
I believe Undying Rage actually came later.
Gotcha.
I think there were actually 2 cycles of these. There's one in Urza's Saga and one in Urza's Legacy. But Rancor is just so incredibly busted in comparison to the others.
I mean, it's like cranial plating, right?
Yeah, except this gives evasion.
Right.
Like, it lets you... That's the most important part about Rancor. If Rancor was just 1 green for +2/+0 that, could be recycled, it would basically just be a kind of weird bone splitter that only green could play.
Mm-hmm.
Except that trample just pushes it over the edge.
Yeah, the trample is what makes it really ridiculous.
Then we got 4 tragic slips. Like, stuff's dying anyway. You might as well get that -13/-13. There's not really much depth to that, like, going in there. We got 4 Unearths, which hit every single creature in the deck.
Yeah, I love Unearth in this deck. I just think it's so great. It's like, you sack the Blister Pod, you get the Blister Pod back, you sack it again, you have 2 Scions on the field.
Well, yeah, and the other deck that Unearth sees a lot of play in is Mono Black, and in Mono Black, you can only get maybe like half your creature base back with it.
Right, you can get like your utility creatures, but not your finishers.
Yeah, like in this, if you do like the turn 1 Carrion Feeder and they immediately have the Disfigure for it, then you just get it back later. Then we've got 1 Rite of Consumption. Do you know this card?
I love that this card is playing it, because that really pushes this over the edge as like, because it's fling. It's fling for source. It's a fling black sorcery. Be in 1, sack a creature.
It also drains.
Yeah. It also drains.
So like
you gain the life.
You can do a non-lethal Rite of Consumption if you just need if you can push through on your next turn and you're willing to give up 1 creature. It can just be a minor like drain life effect.
But I just I love fling combo a whole lot. It's a big reason to play Affinity. I especially love that there's a black version of it. I especially love that this deck is playing it.
Also, it's got super sweet Shadowmoor art.
Yeah,
like it's got the creepy fire people. I forget what they were called.
It's a miser elementals.
Yeah.
Cinders.
There you go.
Something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a real neat card. I like that it's a one-of because it's not something you want to be drawing into every time. This isn't.
But there are some games where you'll draw it and you'll just win on the spot.
Yeah, like maybe that Bloodthrone Vampire knocks him down to 6 and. They're okay with that, but they don't have the counterspell back.
Right, it's exactly fling, except you gain the life and it's a sorcery.
Yeah, the sorcery thing does kind of make me less of a fan of it, to be totally honest.
That's why I don't play it in Affinity.
Yeah, well, then you don't. Do you actually have any black sources in your Affinity deck?
4 drums, 2 prisms.
Oh, true.
I mean, I play Edict in the board.
All right. So our land base, pretty much what you'd expect: 6 forests, 4 jungle hollows, 7 swamps, and then. Just for that little bit of spice, 2 copies of Colony Garden. That's the one that you get the 0/1 plant with.
Which, yeah, again, think it's excellent. Very synergistic with the rest of the deck. This deck has a lot of really good synergies going for it. And when your land creates something that you can then eat later, I mean, that's just gravy.
So my only concern with it is, I feel like in the hands where it's good, it's really good, but I would be so worried to like drawing an opening hand with 2 Colony Gardens and no other land is just going to feel terrible because you can't play any of your sack outlets. They both come in tapped, so you're going to be slower than your opponent. But, I feel like that's going to be a minority of games. So
you would have to mulligan that hand because I think this deck needs a black source to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, most of your like heavy win cons and interaction with your opponent, in all honesty, is all the black half of this deck.
And let's be fair, there are 7 swamps. Actually, there are more green sources in here, right? There's 7 swamps, 4 jungle hollows versus 6 forests, 2 colony gardens, and 4 jungle hollows. So that means there is 1 more green source in this deck than black source.
Yeah. But I don't think colony garden's the end of the world in this deck. I think the situations where it's good are far going to outnumber the ones where it's detrimental. As far as the sideboard goes, it's pretty much what you might expect here.
There's some spicy stuff in here, though.
So 3 aerial volleys, it's a card that on its face looks like a very restricted green lightning bolt, but hoo boy, until you've killed Delver and like a fairy miscreant with this for 1 green, oh man.
I have played this card against Delver. It is amazing. Like it is like I didn't think it was gonna be very good. I brought him in. It was incredible. Like basically a 3-for-1.
Yeah, no. So sometimes you do get that brutal 3-for-1 on like 3 copies of Fairy Miscreant.
Yeah, it was excellent.
We got 2 copies of Innocent Blood, one of my favorite Edict effects. That in this deck it's not as great as it could be because you are still probably sacrificing a creature in reality, but you have so many disposable creatures. Where this is basically, a sorcery speed edict for 1 black.
Well, and I can see that being an argument that this card is better than maybe Diabolic because even though you also have to sack a creature, you don't care about your creatures as much.
Yeah, you just have so many creatures that can be sacrificed, and you're not going to miss them that much. 3 Natural State. Now, Natural State's the one out of Oath of the Gatewatch, correct?
Correct.
1 green, blow up an artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less.
Definitely artifact, not 100% on enchantment. And then they don't gain any life, unlike the other one.
Yeah, Nature's Claim.
Yeah, I was gonna say naturalize, natural order. One of those, please.
No, so Natural State is 1 green instant, destroy an artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost 3 or less.
Okay,
so
cool.
It hits all of your, Journey to Nowheres. It hits a lot of the early drops in Affinity. Also hits your lands.
And we're seeing an uptick of this card, like more than I would think. And
Really?
Yeah, like I've seen it in more lists lately, and I assume it's because decks like Stompy and decks like this don't want to give their opponent 4 extra life.
Yeah, I mean, in this deck, like, it is an aggressive deck, but 4 life is kind of right on that borderline. Like,
and then it's also like what enchantments and artifacts, like sure, Mirror Enforcer, and Frogmite are like the only 2 I can think of that don't get hit by this.
They get played commonly. Yeah, I think that's about it. Like, I think everything else gets hit. It hits Circles of Protection as well.
Oh yeah, which is
probably pretty big because this deck doesn't have many ways to get by that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome.
Worth noting though, Blisterpod does have Devoid, which while it was a complete stinker of a mechanic, is kind of relevant if your opponent has Circle of Protection green for some reason.
I mean, it's a stinker of a mechanic because there's no Eldrazi Temple in this format, right?
yeah, that's fair. Then we got 3 Augur of Skulls.
That's the spicy tech that I couldn't wait to get to.
So I used to run this in a Trinket Mage list because Undying Eviling this dude is the funniest thing in the world. So Augur of Skulls is a 1/1 for 1 and a black and has a wonderfully old school style mechanic on it. During your upkeep, you can sacrifice it to make your opponent pitch 2 cards out of their hand. Now, and it also regenerates for 1 and a black.
Yeah,
so,
for what it's worth.
Yeah. So this is, instead of running Duress, they're running something that they can recur with Unearth and, just get ridiculous value out of. But, I did a couple times get to live the dream of turn 3 mind twisting my opponent with this. And
I think this card is very good. I think it's a little too situational for most decks. In this deck, it seems fine, but I wish that this card had a little bit more spotlight because I think it's a very interesting take on a discard mechanic.
Well, I mean, it's Mind Rot for 1 mana less. Mm-hmm. You do have to wait a turn,
right?
And that's the other thing about it. It does tend to eat removal, but it also kind of forces your opponent to use removal on a less than optimal creature.
Right. Either they have to spend the removal or they lose 2 cards. So
yeah. So I feel like either way, you're kind of getting what you want out of it. Then we got 2 Feed the Clan, quickly becoming a staple in green sideboards, just because 10 life is actually quite a bit in this format.
Yeah, 10 life is huge. You will beat a burn deck if you gain 10 life.
Yeah, and then 3 copies of Respite. I don't know. It's 1 in a green, it's a fog effect, and then you gain 1 life for each attacking creature. I'm kind of curious as to why this is being run over Moment's Peace.
Yeah, also why 3 copies of it? That seems very high for an aggro deck.
Yeah, I mean, it does let you get kind of the drop on the super go wide strategies. Against goblins, that seems great. But I kind of would have preferred this to be like maybe 2 copies of Moments Peace, because while you don't gain the life, you do have the flashback. So like someone was actually, I saw a discussion the other day online about like, why haven't we seen a fog that draws a card? And someone pointed out Moments Peace is a fog that draws you another fog. So I don't know. I kind of would have liked to see
Moments Peace is an amazing card.
Yeah, I kind of would have liked to see 2 Moments Peace in here instead of that. But I feel like Respite probably gets the job done. So yeah, this is just like, this is an exceedingly fair deck as well. Like there's no shenanigans here.
It's just a black-green value deck that once in a blue moon, let's say 1 game out of 10, you'll get to combo kill your opponent with Rite of Consumption. But most times it's just going to be straight beats, 1-for-1ing, good old-fashioned Magic.
Yeah, no, like, and I was glad to see that this won the Pauper Gauntlet. Because that was 70 odd decks, and this was the one that managed to go the distance out of all of them.
And like we talked about earlier, not a tier deck on Moto, or as far as MTG Goldfish is concerned.
No, I had to dig for this list a little bit, actually. And actually, that brings me to another kind of minor note that I want to bring up. This will be the first episode we have that's going to get mirrored on Magic Gathering Strat.
Oh, expertly brought up, Mike.
Yeah, we were talking with Dan, the Fan of History, the, I believe, owner and proprietor of Magic Gathering Strat. And
as far as we know. And
he offered to, have a mirror of our podcast uploaded on their YouTube.
So hello, Magic Gathering Strat fans.
Yeah, hey, we're among good company. Like, I definitely enjoy a lot of the content they put out. They're definitely one of my go-tos when I want something on in the background at work. But, if you're just joining us for the first time, thank you. Thanks for giving us a chance.
Yeah, definitely.
If you manage to live in a corner of the, Pauper Magic community online that we haven't bombarded with posts about our podcast, hello. But moving into some more serious discussion. So tomorrow, we're recording this on Sunday, first off.
Yeah, so it may be tomorrow. It may be Monday by the time you're listening to this.
It probably will be. I'm going to be honest. I don't want to stay up till 1 editing this.
That's fair.
But Monday, banned and restricted announcement.
Yep.
We didn't want to talk about it, but we kind of feel we need to
because
we
don't want to be alarmists now, because we have been a part of the camp that is, it's our official stance. The Color Commentary official stance has been it's too soon. It's too soon. We don't know.
Yeah. I looked today. MTG Goldfish, publishes metagame stats from MTGO. I added them up. All variants of the Peregrine Drake combo deck account for 19.2% of the meta.
Say it ain't so.
So we had kind of been a little bit more forgiving than a large chunk of the Pauper community, because I think both of us, and feel free to correct me here, both of us felt that maybe this was slow enough and non-reliable enough.
Right, and I felt a lot of people calling for the banning of the deck were having a knee-jerk reaction, remembering how broken the Cloud of Furies deck was. I was and still kind of am of the opinion that this deck has to go off on turn 4 or 5, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah, so I was also of the opinion that, it was beatable. It's a boltable body, it's in blue, but none of the decks seem too oppressive, But now we have this blue-red Drake deck that has been refined to a razor point.
Yeah, now we have the data.
Yeah, we now have the data. And the data is pointing to the fact that this is twice as dominant as the next deck down in the meta, which is Affinity. So let's just point this out. So it's followed up quickly by Delver, but usually Delver is top dog in this format, right? So not only did this upset the top deck, it is so format warping at this point, I feel, that another deck has kind of popped in, because Affinity does have that role of the aggro combo. Like, it can just play an aggro game.
Also, I would also say that Affinity is fast enough. If you go, like, turn 2, Frogmite, 4-drop, like,
Yeah.
That's a pretty tough clock for the Drake deck to beat, especially if you back it up with a couple Galvanic Blasts.
Yeah, with the Gal Blast and the Fling combo in there, I feel like it's well poised against this incredibly dominant deck. So I think at this point we gotta say, like, 20% of the meta is too damn much.
And this is very early on in the life cycle of the deck, and people have already figured it out. And, the results speak for themselves.
And here's the thing I want to hit you with. It's been such a short time. Do you really fully honestly believe that this is the absolute optimal configuration for the deck?
Probably not. The only thing that I'm that still the still small voice at the back, the Jiminy Cricket of Magic in my head says that maybe the meta just hasn't had time to adjust to this deck. And I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it because, yeah, it sucks when you see a deck at 20% that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. In Eternal formats especially, I think people like it when the metagame doesn't shift too much, like that radically. But at the same time, Alex Ullman put it, we're fighting tomorrow's battles with today's weapons, right? And it's like, so has the meta just really not shifted, or is the deck really a problem?
Well, I actually spoke to Alex Ullman, who, in case anyone forgot, and I'm sure you didn't because everyone gave him hell for this, he was one of the big proponents of banning Cloud when it was still in the meta. And as time showed, that made the meta much healthier when it got banned. Like, immediately you saw, like, weird brews. Like, every week you could go without fail to MTG Goldfish, and if you scrolled past all the, like, tier decks, you'd find some weird brew that you'd never seen before. So I guess the issue is, again, it kind of winds up falling into that little, like, Splinter Twin in Modern trap, where it's kind of a gatekeeper deck. Like, can you beat Drake has kind of become something you need to think about if you're brewing. Like, you can't show up with something that doesn't have an answer to not instant speed. You can't have a deck that can't interact with your opponent by turn 4 or 5.
Now, here's something I want to hit you with, Dak. People don't complain this much about Delver. Why is that? Is it because the combo is so feel bad?
I think part of it is that feel bad of having to sit there for 20 minutes to half an hour waiting for your opponent to combo out. And I definitely think on MTGO that's a very fair complaint. Obviously, we play in paper as well. And in paper, it's a lot less painful to play.
Yeah, because you can demonstrate loops.
Exactly. As soon as someone gets it online, you can kind of be like, okay, how are you going to loop this to win? And if, they just say, all right, flicker these two, infinite mana, flicker Muldrifter and Wall, draw my deck, find the Caravex Torch.
Well,
I'm good with that.
Here's another thing I want to hit you with real fast. Something that we've talked about a little before that bears mentioning here is that Sinkhole is a legal card where we play. Sinkhole is extremely good against this deck.
But I don't really think that's what's keeping it back. Like, it's been legal for a while. Like, there's one dude locally who plays Sinkhole. Like, let's be honest about that. There's one dude.
But I guess what I'm getting at here is I wish in Eternal formats especially, and of course this isn't happening for Pauper. Modern is really where this complaint has the most legitimacy. Instead of banning cards, I wish they would print answers to cards. Like a Replicate is an answer to Counterbalance.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of banning Counterbalance, they printed a Replicate Miracles. Is this whole other bag of whether or not top should be banned. but I'm just meaning, like, I wish that Wizards would print more answers to cards rather than banning cards.
So it's funny that you bring up Countertop, like Miracles. Excuse me. I'm used to calling it Countertop. Isn't, like, one of the big complaints is in part that deck is highly dominant, but also it takes an age to play in paper.
That's true. Yeah.
Like if someone can't top quickly, it does become a problem. And there's also been stories of someone basically just having their win con in the top 3 and cycling it around so that they can drag the match out. They win at like minute 40, and then their opponent can't possibly beat them in time to get a tied match. So I feel there's some level of similarity there in terms of player complaints. Mm-hmm. I don't have my finger quite as on the pulse on when it comes to Legacy, so I don't want to begin to touch that. But I definitely feel like the time is part of the reason why people are so angry about this. And I also feel like without Cloud of Fairies, Delver is kind of just a fair deck. Like, think about it. Like, I think the only card in there I would label potentially broken or like stupidly powerful is probably Snap and Delver. And both of those are just kind of tempo-y plays. Like, Delver is good if it flips early. And Snap, sometimes, it's the gotcha moment during blockers.
But I see what you mean. It's still a deck that 1-for-1s you. They have to counterspell something, but they spend a counterspell to do so. The only card that kind of isn't is fairy, the counter fairy.
Oh, Spell Setter
Spreader. Thank you. Yeah, Spell Setter Spray.
Like, I don't know. I feel that that's the reason people have never called for a banning to nerf Delver, is just the fact that it, like, you've played against it. It feels very good, but does it ever feel like it's unfair?
Yeah, I guess not.
Like, I think that's the reason why no one's ever called for banning in Delver. I mean, people have, but it's usually pretty quickly dismissed by the community saying Delver's just been here. Like,
well, and that's sort of the argument I'm setting up is like, if you are just like, oh, we got to ban Drake combo, it's like, well, then Delver's just going to be the best deck again, right?
Yeah. I mean,
the meta goes back to where it was a month ago.
Yeah, I assume that if it gets banned, we very, very quickly see a shift back to what we saw before, mono blue, stompy, mono black, affinity, kitty. Like, that's the only major change I think I would expect is Jeskai Kitty comes back in much larger numbers.
Which is, it also is kind of a shame because I actually do like blue-red control as a deck. Like, I don't know. It's refreshing to have a counter burn deck, which is like kind of not a thing in Pauper.
Well, I mean, if you go back like a year and maybe a year and a half or so, do you remember there used to be blue-red Delver, not Delver Fiend, just Delver splashing red for like efficient burn spells.
I do not remember that.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, it wasn't ever as dominant as mono blue just because of the mana issues within Pauper.
Yeah,
but like it was a pretty fair tempo-y deck, and it just kind of existed, and it was never really a problem. So I think maybe the only change I could see in the meta is someone figures out how to put together a competent blue-red control deck again,
right?
And it starts doing okay. But I think it might be time for the Drake to get the axe, because it went from 5% of the meta to 10% to 20%. Right. In like 2 weeks. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, we slowly honed this over the course of a year. And even then I would kind of be like, 20% is a little high when the next deck on the list is only at about 11. But I don't know. I don't want to say ban it outright, because I want to hope that there's maybe some other ban they could have. They can't even do like you can't even ban Ghostly Flicker anymore because they just printed a new version of it.
Yeah,
basically.
it has to be Drake.
Like, it has to be the Drake. And the worst part is, like, I feel like since I spend a lot of time like fiddling with rogue lists and brews, I feel like a lot of the time as soon as blue is in the deck, I'm like, can I slot a Drake combo in here?
Something that's so funny, I've been thinking about it while you've been talking. We've basically had a subject about Drake every episode since Drake became a card. Like, we've had a conversation about it, I feel like, every episode.
I mean, I feel like it's just an inescapable topic.
Yeah.
And up until now, I was of the position of, please stop complaining. We'll see how the meta shakes out.
But now it's like, it's here.
But now it's kind of like, oh, so that's how it's going to be.
Yeah. So let's talk odds. Is the ban going to be tomorrow or today?
Okay. Yeah. God. So there was that post from the Magic developers blog where they said that they basically were calling it a wrap on EMA right around when the Cloud of Fairies ban came. So they are aware of it. They did acknowledge it. I mean, the question was specifically asking about Pauper, but they are aware of it, and they are aware that they basically just gave back the combo piece that was a problem enough that it got banned.
And the direct quote was something like, if we had known that Cloud of Fairies was getting banned, we might not have put Peregrine Drake at common.
Yeah.
It was something to that effect.
Which is, I'm still also like, I don't know. I didn't get to draft EMA when people were drafting it, but it seems very good as a common.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a free spell.
Yeah, that seems like a very, very powerful effect to print, even in a set with like Mana Crypt in it.
Yeah, it's a free spell, so it's always gonna be good.
But like, I don't know. Like, I want to believe it's like a 50-50 on them banning it now versus when Kaladesh is about to release. But I do feel it's getting the ban. I sincerely believe that we will see a Peregrine Drake ban within the next few months.
So not a question of if, a question of when.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I can't see a world unless someone breaks the goddamn Enigma code here and figures out the perfect way to combat this that doesn't just completely make your deck terrible against everything else. I think it's too much of a problem to ignore at this point. And I really hate to sound like we're like completely flip-flopping on this issue, but I don't know. I just feel like it came out around suddenly and it was just like, oh, okay.
Oh dear God.
Oh, great googly moogly. It's all gone to hell. But
the
like,
brochure said there wouldn't be this many ostriches.
but like, I don't know. I feel like in this case, I don't feel bad like reversing my statement completely.
To be fair, we said we would wait for the data to come out.
Yeah.
So we have. It doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's just the data kind of showed up quicker than we expected.
Yes.
So we have a document for this show where we have like all our potential podcast topics, and my note next to the talk about Drake banning says, let's visit this in 4 months when it seems like it's a bigger problem. Like I literally said, let's handle this a third of a year later when I think we have better data. And we literally returned to it with less than a month from when I wrote that note.
That's crazy.
Like, and I really, really hated the like discourse online about it. I really just could not stand the whole like, I hate that whole like, as soon as I have the combo, my opponent should concede. I shouldn't concede because you might mess up the combo. Like, I hate reading those threads. And like those threads get way more discussion in them than like new brew lists or anything.
That's
like,
a conversation unto itself, but when you should concede on Moto.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I feel like it's just become a thorn in the side of like pauper discussion online, where again we've talked about it almost every episode since it came out in some form or another. And most of that was, our interest in like figuring out, is this a problem in the format? But on the other hand, like it kind of is now. Like, and people just couldn't stop talking about it. And like, I feel that's completely reasonable because it was kind of the hot button issue. And now we're kind of coming to a head. And it's a question of, does Wizards ban it now? Or do they let it ride out for another 3 months? And if so, am I willing to ever check any pauper forum in those next 3 months?
Well, we're going to have to post on Reddit. I can handle that if you want, though.
Like, I'm not sure if I can take 3 months of, like, people acting like petulant children on the internet because there's a combo deck that is efficient. And I don't know. It's just... I don't want to say I'm just going to like hide away from the internet and like not check Reddit, but it certainly is tempting if we're going to have to sit through 3 months of this. I'm not kind of like trying to hold a ransom here being like, Wizards, I'll stop making my podcast if you guys don't ban Peregrine Drake. But
why don't they listen to the fans?
I don't know. I kind of feel like it's also maybe a case of just cut it off before it becomes a problem. But
yeah, I mean, we'll just have to wait and see. But if you're ready, that does go into our next discussion.
Yeah. So here's the catch: when Drake was first revealed, my immediate reaction was, "This is good. We have a combo deck back in the format."
Right, because up until then we had One Land Spy, which is almost not even a deck. It's kind of just 60 cards.
Well, we had like all these weird fringe decks. We had One Land Spy,
Midnight Gond.
Yeah, we had Presence of Gond. We had with and without impact tremors. We had Freed from the Real.
Pedal Festival.
Pedal Festival, a.k.a. Simic Splice, whatever you want to call it. We had the black-green Ivy Lane Denizen combo deck.
Yeah, some would argue Kiln Fiend, Delver Fiend.
But I feel like I'm talking about like strictly like the quote-unquote infinite combo.
Right,
where
fair.
Where there's very little coming back from it unless you have the answer in that moment. So I was excited to have one of those decks back in the format because it's kind of the rock, paper, scissors. You know, control beats combo. Aggro can beat control. Combo beats aggro because it's a little bit faster. Or however you want to lay that rock, paper, scissors out. And now that it's back, it's kind of like, why do you have to keep doing this in Blue Wizards? And I really honestly think that's it. Like, going all the way back to our first episode where we talked about Delver's only so good because it's in blue.
Well, and that's the thing, right? The reason that Drake is so good is because it's a blue deck. It has Counterspell. It has Ghostly Flicker. It has card draw. It has everything. It's a control deck that combos you.
Exactly. And I feel like if they can present us with an infinite combo that's better than what we have now, like Presence of Gond is Pauper's Splinter Twin, and it's probably tier 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's not very good.
But the reason for that is it's in green-white, and sometimes red even. Like, as soon as you hit the third color, you're starting to get real dodgy there.
Yeah.
But I feel that because it's in these two colors, that, you know, you've got Vines of Vastwood, and you've got, what's the other one?
Apostles
Blessing. There we go. Because those are kind of your only two ways to protect your combo pieces, it never gets out of hand.
Right.
Like, sure, they steal games, but...
Yeah, I agree with you. Also, yeah.
You just want a happy medium here, guys.
Yeah,
like
Thermo Alchemist, it's up to you, basically. make a good combo deck.
Actually, like, I'd actually be very okay with that. I would be very okay with a turn 3.
And that's still a wall flicker me walls deck, you know, because it's like
it could be.
Because you make infinite wall cycles, and then with each iteration you tap and untap the Alchemist. And
I mean, in that deck, I feel like you're probably playing Archaeomancer just because it's 3 mana instead of 5.
I couldn't say flicker me walls, Mike.
I really, there's a handful of phrases I've heard in my life that I never want to hear again, and I feel like Flicker Me Walls is right up there.
We're getting t-shirts now. Everyone, hashtag it. Hashtag Flicker Me Walls.
Okay, so I guess you could do it that way, and it does leave it a little bit more vulnerable because it doesn't give you that other angle of attack, which I think is what the blue-red Drake deck has going for it in droves, is the fact, like, we literally just the other day were recording Rebrew, and we got beaten by blue-red Drake, and they never attempted the combo.
Right.
And I think that's the big issue, is that it plays a fine control game. It also plays a very good and very efficient and very hard to deal with combo game. So unless you can answer both of those, it's a little tricky to ever deal with it. So I don't know what the answer is, and I think that's the thing.
Do you think it's because the limitations of Pauper as a format prevent there from being a solid combo deck that also doesn't run hog wild over the fair decks of the format?
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of the issue, is you have like 2 modes for Pauper combo decks. Unattainable Rube Goldberg, like 5 or 6 card interaction jank. And then just like this, as soon as I get this combo in place, there is literally nothing you can do. If you don't show me the Bolt or the Terminate or the Edict effect, we can just go to game 2. And what I want is like a happy medium where it's like, I don't know, maybe something that combos turn 5, like at the earliest. But because that's the thing, like, I feel it's one of the limitations of the lower power level in some ways of Pauper.
I'm going to pretend you didn't say that.
Well, I mean, there's some effects we just don't get, right?
Free counterspells being chief among them.
Free counterspells is one of them. Actually,
well, days kind of. But.
I mean, we've got days, but I don't know if Drake combo is getting juked by days. You kind of deserved that one.
Yes, definitely.
I don't know. I feel like days everyone knows to play around once you're trying to like do something really important. But well, yeah, you raised a good point though. The free counterspell in Force of Will. Force of Will keeps legacy combo decks in check.
And honestly, that's why Control in Modern is so bad because there's no free counterspell. There's not even a days in that format.
Yeah, there's no.
There's not even Force Spike.
Actually, Force Spike would make Modern a much more pleasant format.
There's Mana Tithe, but not Force Spike.
Yeah, there's another topic in there about how I feel. I feel that like soft counters in white is a good thing, but
we'll get to that another time.
We'll tackle that some other day. But yeah, I feel like in order for there to be a good balance, we need a combo that can be answered in a reliable way without forcing you into like incredible deck building constraints, right? Because there's kind of like, again, not to harp on the whole Splinter Twin thing, but it was like, okay, so Splinter Twin's a big combo. Now, Jund is sideboarding Rakdos Charm because sometimes it just gets them when they combo out. And there's this back and forth, but we kind of have a more limited palette of sideboard cards. Like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but most sideboards are kind of paint by numbers at this point. Like, barring, like, I guess Affinity has a lot of play because it is technically a 5-color deck. But, like, if you're playing, I don't know, let's say a Tortured Existence deck, you're going to have Fairy Macabre in your sideboard. Just because it fits.
Yeah, it's uncounterable answer to Drake.
Yeah, or any other graveyard synergy, really. Like, it's great in the mirror in that deck. But...
Well, imagine if Pauper had, like, Rest in Peace.
Yeah, right? I don't want to imagine
No,
that.
I'm just saying there'd be no Drake combo deck. There's no like, Void. Not like...
Yeah, no
not Urza's Void. Like,
Leyline of the Void.
Yeah, Leyline of the Void. Rest in Peace style effects.
Like... I want to say that there's a happy medium, but I'm not sure if there can be. Like, it feels like we're either going to live in a world of unimpressive combos or completely oppressive combos.
So this is another good point then. In that case, do we want Pauper to have any combo decks at all? Or would we rather stick to the hallmarks of the format, which are creature decks with better removal than creatures, where they bash into each other endlessly? For me, that's fine. And then there's some good control decks. Like, I'm okay with that style of Magic. I don't really like playing against combo decks. Just personally, I understand the role in the format, but
yeah, sure. So let me hit you with this. We actually, before the show, were talking, and you referred to Affinity as kind of a combo deck because it does kind of have a combo out. The catch is with that one, and why I don't think anyone's ever been like ban Fling or ban Atog, is you kind of go super all in on that.
Yeah, you have to basically you have to know for sure you're going to be winning right then.
Yeah, so maybe that's more the answer. Like an incredibly fragile combo that's not like it has a clear weakness that is not that doesn't force you to make your deck weird to work with it.
So because you're saying Fling is the perfect combo.
I'm saying Fling is a combo I have never been mad about.
Yeah.
Like, I've definitely been, like, irritated when it's like, okay, as long as my opponent doesn't have a Fling, they're top decking, they have, like, a 2 in 40 chance here, I can win this. Like,
top deck Fling.
Yeah. It feels like they always get the Fling,
Luck,
right?
skill, victory.
But, like, I definitely feel that Fling is a less salt-inducing combo in a lot of people because it never feel like, I don't know, personally it never feels that bad. It just feels like, okay, if I had the counterspell there, you would have just been without a board. But I don't know. I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Like, there's some happy medium of combo that doesn't make people super salty about it, and is still efficient enough that it wins games. So I don't know what it is and where we're going to find it, but I just want there to be a good combo deck. And I feel like another part of it is just the fact that as soon as you pass 2 colors in Pauper, your mana base starts getting real messy.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I guess you might be right. Is combo something that Pauper needs as a tier 1 strategy?
Yeah. I don't know, because clearly no one's happy with Drake except for people who play Drake, I guess. But
well, even people who play Drake aren't super happy about the way people react when they play Drake.
Yeah. It's
like I
thanks
feel like,
for being cancer, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not helpful to the format as a whole to have this deck running around. And I don't want to be like super like posy unity and shit here, but at the same time, like it is something that I care about, like the community coming together and like not being assholes to one another.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess we're coming pretty close on time here, just kind of wrapping things up. You know, I would like to reiterate what I said in one of these terrible posts on Reddit. Please, just let them make up their mind if they want to ban it or not.
Yeah, you have no influence over Wizards here.
Don't be terrible to your opponents online because they're playing a deck you don't like. That's literally the worst thing you could do in this situation.
Just etiquette 101.
Let's see how this shakes out. Well, that's all we got for today. Thanks to Pat's Games for giving us a place to play Pauper almost every week, except for pre-release weeks. Thanks to L for the use of his song Quantitative as our theme music. His music can be found on SoundCloud under the name LLL. Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. We're also on iTunes, and if you subscribe there, please leave an iTunes review. It really helps us out. I should also note we're back on Google Play Music. I finally got it working.
Nice.
I had to send like 3 support emails, and they never told me they fixed it, but it looks like if you are on a Google device, you can finally subscribe to our podcast. If you have an idea for a discussion topic or a deck list you want us to discuss, you can use the contact form on our site or email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. I'm Michael Petchek.
I'm Adrian Warzales.
Signing off for Color Commentary.